5 hitters that saw the biggest rise in where they went in the points league mock that we did versus the roto mock that we did a month ago. So Alex Bregman went 38th overall in this draft, and he went 72nd in the roto one. Adley Rutschman went 46th in this draft. He went 69th in roto. Ketel Marte, 67th in this draft, 108th in roto. Max Muncy, 77th in this draft, 97th in the other. And Stephen Kwan, 99th overall, just inside the top 100. He went 175th in roto. And for all these players, Scott, they have good plate discipline. In the case of Adley Rutschman, he just plays so much that playing time advantage just really sets him apart from other catchers. He hits a lot of doubles. He has good plate discipline as well. Max Muncy, a very clear OBP versus batting average standout. So again, that one makes sense. And Stephen Kwan, he doesn't really contribute much in any category in a roto league, but 8th in plate appearances, a 10% strikeout rate, that will definitely help in this format.
Yeah, just by avoiding strikeouts, Stephen Kwan ends up being not a stud in this format, but like a player who clearly deserves to start in this format, even though he was pretty underwhelming by roto standards last year. Trying to see if I can find his points per game. So yeah, he's 35th in my outfield rankings, 2.90 points per game for Stephen Kwan this past year, which was better than Jazz Chisholm. It was better than George Springer. It was better than Michael Harris. It made Stephen Kwan pretty good. Now I rank those 3 players I just mentioned. I all rank ahead of Stephen Kwan, even in points leagues for next year. But that's part of what I meant earlier when I was saying that you get to a certain point in the hitter ranks where in a shallow format like this, there just isn't that much differentiation between, like a 5th and 6th round hitter and like I don't know what round exactly, 12th and 13th round hitter. They're all looking pretty similar at that point in terms of average per game output.
And if you are drafting hitters in those middle rounds, in the 12th or 13th round, like we said earlier, in a shallower format, you're more likely to take those swings because you want to find a hitter that's going to excel and move ahead of the bunch, ahead of the pack, not just kind of like, be steady Eddie. Stephen Kwan, by the way, if you look at cumulative fantasy points, Scott, he finishes the 17th best outfielder in points leagues this year. He was 37th in roto. So that's a pretty massive difference, right? I understand points per game versus like overall points. Obviously, there are some differences there, and his playing time definitely gives him an advantage in the cumulative points. But yeah, Stephen Kwan definitely one that excels in this format. What about hitters that went the other way? So ones that dropped down from where they went in roto to where they went in this draft. So Bo Bichette, who I actually selected 47th overall, he went 29th in the roto mock draft, which, might shock some people, but he has bad plate discipline. He doesn't walk very much. He averaged 2.9 fantasy points per game. That was
same as Stephen Kwan.
Yeah, that was less than JP Crawford and Nico Warner and Gunnar Henderson, so interesting there. Ellie De La Cruz.
JP Crawford, that's the headliner of that group. My goodness.
Ellie De La Cruz. Now, this is an interesting one, Scott, because he went 28th in the roto draft. He went 61st in head-to-head points. It might be overstated because he still averaged 3 fantasy points per game because he was just so electric still. I mean, stealing as many bases as he did and hitting home runs.
Yeah.
But his plate discipline is very bad. I mean, it's a near 34% strikeout rate, only an 8% walk rate. What do you think? Do you think it should be that different for Ellie De La Cruz? 28th in roto, 61st in points.
In terms of how he's valued in the 2 formats, I don't think it should be that different. I think he should go earlier in roto leagues, but we think of stolen base heavy players as being more roto friendly for good reason, because there's a scarcity there and there's they're essential in a roto league. Like you have to get steals, a certain number of steals to balance your portfolio when you could make up for a lack of steals in any number of ways in a points league. So yes, That's part of the reason why Julio Rodriguez, Bobby Witt are top 3 players for me overall in Roto, and not necessarily first rounders for me in points. But now that we're entering an era where the high end stolen base totals, like the leaderboard, it's going to be a much bigger number of stolen bases, more in the 40 to 50 range rather than in the 30 to 40 range. That adds a lot of points. That adds a lot of the guys we think of as the best base stealers in the game now have a higher point ceiling because it's 2 points for every stolen base. That adds up when you get into like the 40 plus range. And it seems like Ellie De La Cruz is going to be one of those guys. And that's why for all the contact issues, for all the inconsistency with the bat, he still ended up with so many points per game because he was so prolific on the bases. I don't see that changing.
3 other names that dropped down from our points league mock to the Roto one. Reverse that. Dropped down from the Roto one to the points league. Michael Harris went 34th in one, 64th in the other. Matt McLain from 45th in Roto to 79th in a points league. And Josh Lowe from 64th in Roto to 110th in a points league. And Scott, I know you were the one who drafted Josh Lowe, and I know
And
you
both.
like him. Yeah. He finished as the 12th best outfielder in Roto this year, the 25th best outfielder in a points league. Doesn't walk much. And the lack of plate appearances, that doesn't hurt you in Roto because he still gives you good ratios, right? Like he provided good batting average and power and speed. But 501 plate appearances, that ranked 51st among outfielders. In a points league, you need guys that are on the field, that are going to play, be everyday players. And maybe that will be the case for Josh Lowe this year, but it wasn't in 2023.
Yeah, and I've already said part of the reason I rank him so high is because I do expect him to play more regularly for the Rays this year. Maybe I'm seeing that, reading that a little too optimistically, but I think they're going to need the offense, and I think Josh Lowe might be their best offensive player at this point. He did average 3.10 points per game last year, so it's not like it. I see him sliding as less about him being bad for the format as people having other positions to fill, namely pitchers. Like people were drafting a higher number of pitchers and a lower number of outfielders. Obviously, we're talking a 3 outfielder league here. In a Roto league, we're talking a 5 outfielder league. So I think that has as much to do with the disparity as the shape that Josh Lowe's production takes. It's just people have higher priorities in that early to mid round range than a number 2 outfielder.
And wanted to quickly point out with Matt McLain, I do think there's a little bit of the same thing with Ellie De La Cruz. Obviously, McLain not expected to steal 40 or 50 bags, but I just think he's going to be so good that it will kind of outweigh the lack of plate discipline, right? Doesn't walk all that much, struck out nearly 30% of the time, but he hits a lot of line drives. So I think the batting average should still be good. It's a great ballpark. I think the lineup's pretty good. The counting stats should be there, power and speed. So Matt McLain is another one where I think he probably should go higher than the 79th that he went in this points league mock draft, just because he does other things so well that it will kind of outweigh the bad plate discipline that he provides.